Welcome back, press fans, coming to you from Altman Studios in downtown Brentwood to your ears wherever you are. This is Clocked In with the Press. As always, I'm Jake Menez, and here with me today is Oakley Police Chief Paul Beard. How you doing, Paul?
Good. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for being here. Before we get into it, let's hear a quick word from this episode's sponsor.
Today's episode is sponsored by our friends at Sip & Scoop in downtown Brentwood. Sip & Scoop delivers smiles for miles, sip by sip and scoop by scoop. Gelato, Italian ice, and signature coffee beverages are just a few of the delicious treats on their menu. Stop by Sip & Scoop at 234 Oak Street in downtown Brentwood to get your fix. They're also on DoorDash.
Thanks once again to this week's sponsor. Let's dive in. So, Paul, for those who don't already know, how long have you been the police chief in Oakley?
I became the interim police chief in September of 2021, and I became the regular police chief in January of this year.
And before that, what role did you serve in the department?
I was hired in May of 2016. My original role for the department was that of a detective. When I arrived at the department, I came as the department broke off from the sheriff's office. And my lieutenant at the time, Lieutenant Eric Navarro, he told me that they were adding a fourth detective, and I was going to be that fourth detective. And that fourth detective was kind of designated as the special projects detective. So I got a lot of interesting cases in that respect. After that, I promoted to the role of sergeant for the Oakley Police Department in February of 2017. And then from there, I went to patrol as a sergeant and then administrative sergeant. And then somewhere in 2019, I believe it is, I became lieutenant. And I served as lieutenant until I made chief.
And so let's roll back a little bit further even. So before you were with the Oakley Police Department, where did you work?
Yeah, I spent a full career with the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office. I started there in 1990, and again, retiring in 2016 to take on my employment as an Oakley detective.
So you were at the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department. So were you already an Oakley resident prior to joining the Oakley force?
I was a Brentwood resident, and I still am. My family comes from this area. My family migrated here from Arkansas to Oakley in 1944, so I've had a lifelong connection to the city of Oakley.
Why did you choose to become a police officer? What inspired you to become a police officer?
That's a very easy question to answer. From the moment I was young enough to, or old enough, I should say, to understand what my parents are talking about, I began to realize that my paternal grandmother was a police officer in Arizona. And my father himself was a reserve police officer in Arizona. My grandmother was a deputy sheriff for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and she was a police officer for the Chandler Police Department. And I'm not sure which one came first. I forget that aspect of it. But I do know that for the Chandler Police Department, she was the first female police officer for that department. And to help me close that loop a little bit, or it was a lifelong source of interest for me, was my grandmother. And she passed before I was born, so I never got to meet her. But in 2007 or 2008, I took our group of explorers from the Contra Costa Sheriff's Office to Chandler, Arizona for a competition that they do for the explorers. It's a competition that's open to all explorer posts across the nation, and I was very excited because I got to go to Chandler, Arizona, right? And as part of just being there, I got to tour the PD, and without saying anything to anybody, I carried my grandmother's badge with me on the trip, and I didn't really do my research into the Chandler PD at the time, but when I got there, I realized, or I became familiar with the chief of Chandler PD, who was a woman, and so I thought it was very cool to show her the badge of the first female police officer to the chief of the Chandler Police Department to kind of show how far that whole thing had gone, right? And I did find my grandmother's photo on the wall, which was really cool.
It's very much a family affair then.
Yes.
Do you have siblings or anything that are also police officers, just giving a bigger scope to that?
I'm the only person in my family currently involved in law enforcement. I'm the one that took that bug and ran with it.
So now that you're in law enforcement, what does a typical day on the job look like for Chief Paul Beard compared to, say, Lieutenant Paul Beard?
For Chief Paul Beard, I have to meet the needs of a broader spectrum audience, right? I have department heads I have to meet the needs for. I have all of my sergeants and my two lieutenants and every other officer under me and non-sworn people. I have to meet those needs. And I try to be very diligent about receiving the emails, receiving the phone calls, and actually providing some follow-up action associated with those things. So this being a Monday morning, Mondays are always busy, right? And so Monday morning, that's what it is. I try to keep it during the weekend, but Monday morning, it's picking up the emails and just running hard with them.
And so how does that compare to your role back when you were lieutenant?
Lieutenant, I was more narrow in focus. I was the operations lieutenant, and so I would just sort of handle the operational matters, the patrol matters that happened over the weekend or day-to-day operations. I would handle the various reviews that we have to do of things that our department does, but it was very much something that was in my wheelhouse at that time because I've been a lifelong operational guy, so my role has just expanded as the chief.
So you've really become more the big picture guy more than anything else.
Yeah, my calendar is very full. I've never been much of a calendar guy, But my people, I can't say enough about the people who I'm department heads with. They really help me line up my day and show me where I need to go and just fill my calendar with things that I really need to be doing.
And now, obviously, you came into the role in sort of an abrupt way with the firing the former police chief. So what was the hardest part about stepping into that role on such short notice?
Well, the situation made it the toughest thing, and that situation has been well documented. I don't see any need to really go into that right now. I will say that my predecessor, he was a very good mentor for me and really provided me with a lot of tools that I needed to prepare me for this role. Didn't see it coming, but he really did help me understand what police department organization was like.
And so you've been in the role close to a year now. What would you say is your favorite part of this new role for you?
My favorite role is when I hear good things about my people and things that I had nothing to do with at all. This weekend, I became aware that one of my officers received a very flattering email, or the department received a very flattering email about his actions. And his action in this instance was he was dealing firsthand with a First Amendment auditor, which by nature, a First Amendment auditor and a peace officer, it's sort of a antagonizing relationship right from the get-go. And as this whole thing played out, my officer handled it perfectly and got through all the bumps in the road with this auditor, and actually brought that auditor in to help him with an investigation, help broadcast a missing person that he was investigating at that time. So with zero interaction from me or any supervisor at all, this person that works for Oakley PD was able to showcase his positive skill sets. And I'm happy and I'm proud when I hear good things about my people.
And so for context for listeners, what is a First Amendment auditor? Just to give more context to that story.
I don't have a full understanding of everything they focus on, but they like to come to government facilities, and they try to basically catch government employees not allowing them to express their First Amendment rights as citizens. And so they tend to push the boundaries of where they're allowed to be in a government facility. They like to record the activities of the government workers. They like to record if they can, inside of government vehicles. And so it just sort of automatically strikes you as, hey, what's going on here? What are you doing? It looks very suspicious at first.
And so would you say that there's an uptick in seeing things like that over the last couple of years?
Over the last 2 years, there has certainly been an uptick in that. Some of these auditors are more aggressive and obnoxious than others. The one that we dealt with in this weekend's instance was not that at all. I truly believe that she was just trying to identify areas of concern, if any are found. And I am very happy and proud to say she did not find anything with our officer.
So with police's relationship with the public, more in the public eye after the last couple of years, how does that influence the way the department operates?
More public outreach. There are some things that are automatically in place for us. Like, there's been these long-standing programs such as Coffee with a Cop, or we have National Night Out coming up, right? And those are things I think that most departments feel obligated to do. But what does a department want to do? And those are the things that you really have to identify. What do you want to do that is over and beyond these organized events? And I feel like we have really done very well with wanting to do more for the public. We spend more time with the everyday resident as we are investigating their crimes. We are getting out to the schools more. It's just being more accessible and more transparent to the public. And I think we're getting pretty good at that right now.
And do you feel that the community as a whole has kind of has accepted you because of that?
My personal feeling on Oakley and their relationship with the police department is we have always been supported. I cannot think of a time when Oakley as a general whole was suspicious of their police department or anti-law enforcement. You're always going to have individuals or maybe small groups within a community that express that, but the community of Oakley has always been supportive of the police department. And I want to make sure that the police department is supportive of the community and keep that relationship going as is.
As a very symbiotic thing, obviously.
Yes, absolutely.
So we talked about positive elements of the job. What would you say, stepping into the role last year, since then, what's been the biggest challenge as a whole?
The biggest challenge has been calendar management. Honestly, I know what I want to get done in a day, but then I step in, I look at the calendar, I think, there's no way I'm going to do this project that I really want to work on and really need to work on, right? So it is just being spread thin, torn in a couple different directions at a time, and then realizing if you want to get the project work done, you simply have to work long, and you stay late and work long, and that tends to be what I do.
And so when it comes to that project work, you've got 12 hours of work blocked into a 10-hour day or whatever. How do you prioritize?
You simply take what's important right now, and what's important now, and that is my mentality to the whole thing. I know the long-term things that I really have to get to, but invariably something's going to pop up during the day that I need to kind of forget about this long-term project and really focus on this immediate matter right now.
So there's a degree of flexibility that has to go into the job, obviously.
Absolutely. This from day one, this has never been a job that was scripted from start to finish. It's very fluid.
Can you share with listeners a specific on-the-job anecdote that stuck with you, either as one of your proudest moments or a challenge you've recently had to overcome?
I think moments of pride, for me, moments of pride have been very career era specific. I can tell you early in my career, I was simply proud that I made it. I was hired by the county. I made it through the academy. And I spent my time in jail. That's the first assignment you do in the counties. You spend time in the detention division, and then I came out and I passed FTO, and I was very proud of that. I was a patrol deputy, and I was proud of that. Then you start to realize, okay, that's not good enough, and then I became proud of individual things I had done along the way. One that does stick out early in my career. I was assigned to the contract city of Lafayette, and it was wintertime, it was a swing shift, it was completely dark, and there was a lost boy. The child, he was 7 years old, he was missing from the home, and so was the family dog. So the belief is that he took the family dog out for a walk, which, a very sweet and cool little thing, right? Not when it's dark. And so we spent a couple hours on that looking for that boy. That was our main focus at that time. I literally found that boy. I heard him calling for us up on a hillside, and his dog was right near him. And I don't know why that moment sticks with me, but it does. I was proud to be involved with that family because they are very grateful to have their boy back. Then as the career progresses, you kind of get away from these individual moments of pride. And what am I doing for the organization? And in the sheriff's office, I became very proud to be part of the sheriff's SWAT team. I was known as a team leader on the team, and I was very proud to work with men and women that really were serious about the job the way I was. I was so happy to be aligned with those people and the things that we got done together. Now, at this stage of my career, I'm on the last leg. People don't become chiefs when they're brand new. I'm late in their career. I've got 32 years on. At this point, I am very proud of how my department is acting and serving within the city, and how the entire city of Oakley is coming together. And there's so much interdepartmental support for one another right now. And I have had some to do with that. That's been a long-term desire of mine that we see that in the city of Oakley. But I'm really proud of the people that work under me, that they have gravitated towards that, and they see the good in all of their coworkers. And so that's where I'm at with it right now.
You keep going back and talking about the people under you so positively. What is your philosophy on leadership?
I follow the script of being a servant leader. I do understand my role. My role is I'm at the top, and everybody else, they are subordinate to me, and they do work for me. But I have to work for them as well. It has to be a give and take. They have to see that I am there to support them. if I expect any amount of support out of them. They have to understand that they are supported and that their back is had by me.
And of course, you learned stuff like that through experience. Did you have positive leaders as you were coming up in your career?
I did. I had very good examples of people to look at in the sheriff's office and Oakley as well. I think if you're lacking something in your life, there's all kinds of literature out there that you can, fill in those gaps with. And so I've done that as well.
It's just the personal education is such an important part.
Absolutely.
On that note, Chief Beard and I are going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Alexis Gabe case and the department's involvement in the investigation. Stick around.
Today's episode of Clocked In with the Press is brought to you by our friends at Sip and Scoop in downtown Brentwood. Sip and Scoop started out as a food truck, serving coffee, hot cocoa, and desserts on the go, but the demand was so high that they had to open a shop at 234 Oak Street. Here at Clocked In, we love Sip and Scoop. They're just a few doors down from our offices, and we're there often enough that they know our names and orders. It's like Cheers, but better because there's dessert. Try their cold brew coffee or choose a latte or Americano for a classic coffee drink that can't be beat. And we haven't even talked about their breakfast sandwiches and avocado toast. Have I mentioned the root beer floats and the iced lemonades? Those are my personal favorites. Okay, obviously I could talk about food all day, but here's the point. You gotta go to Sip and Scoop. Visit them at 234 Oak Street in downtown Brentwood or have Sip and Scoop brought to you wherever you are by DoorDash. Having an event? Let Sip and Scoop cater it. Give them a call at 925-684-7710 to find out more.
Thanks once again to our sponsor. I'm here once again with Chief Beard. We're going to turn the focus of the conversation now to the Alexis Gabe case. Bear in mind, listeners, that because the case is still ongoing, not all these questions will have easy answers or answers at all, but we wanted to ask them for the sake of transparency. So, Chief Beard, what elements of the search are you able to share that have not yet been publicized?
Well, I believe that we have been very transparent with our efforts in the wake of the death of Marshall Jones. Prior to the death of Marshall Jones, we did have to hold things tight to the chest because we were investigating, and the nature of an investigation means that sometimes, most of the time, the agency doing the investigation has to have proprietary ownership of the information in order to make it a fruitful and effective investigation. But since his passing, I think that we have been very transparent with what we've done.
This question is going to be fairly straightforward, and just, yes or no is fine, but
Yeah.
Do you know where her body is?
No, do not.
And so what has perplexed you the most about this case? What's been the biggest confusion?
Well, I think the last question, where is her body? It has been all-consuming of my department to discover the whereabouts of Alexis Gabe, and we remain dedicated to that. The specific means of the how and the why and that sort of thing, if we could answer all those things, we would be closer to her location, but we don't have everything answered just yet.
And of course, this is an aside. Over the weekend, the family did have a search for her cell phone. Was the department involved with that search in any way?
Yes, we were involved because anything that does get recovered in a search like that will get turned over to us. So by nature, we were on standby for anything that was discovered, anything that would be considered relevant or germane to the investigation. But in addition to that, it's my understanding that my weekend day shift crew actually physically got involved with the search themselves.
And you anticipate anything that was recovered as part of that search being helpful to your investigation?
I've not been given a complete rundown of everything that was recovered, but nothing was recovered that would create an aha moment for me.
So missing persons cases are a regular part of the police logs that are updated weekly that we run in the paper. They're available online as well. So what made the Alexis Gabe case different from those in terms of just how much the public engaged with it?
The total nature of her case is what got the public so involved. Early on, our officers identified that this was not a usual missing person case. And I guess I should define a usual missing person case by me saying that. Typically, we get a lot of reports of missing people regarding people that want to be missing. They walk away on their own accord. They are trying to get away from a situation or a relationship, or they simply are just taking a time out from life. Their loved ones will simply call and report them as a missing person. And when they give us all this information on the missing person, they tell us all these factors of this person's life. This person is not happy in the relationship. This person is having some trouble at work. This person has psychological issues, or this person is a chronic drug abuser. Those are things that we can start to put this case in this kind of a bucket, and this person's been listed as missing before. This is where we've found this person, and this is about how long this person stays missing when this person goes away. So Alexis Gabe checked none of those boxes, and the initial reporting of her disappearance was very suspicious to all of us involved in the case. So suspicious that we were coming in on our days off that day to get this investigation started.
Without a body and with Marshall Jones dead, how do you get justice for what happened to her?
Well, let's go with the scenario of my child was abducted and killed. Am I ever going to get justice for that person or for that situation, for my child's killing? God forbid that should ever happen. So I don't know that these are situations where you ever get exact justice. I have often wondered what I would do if I were the Gabes, and I that thought process has led me to wonder: is this how the Polly Class Foundation came to be? Because Polly's gone. Polly is no longer with us. Polly is no longer with her mom and dad. But her parents kept her memory alive by creating this foundation that would help other families, other victims, other survivors in these like situations. And I think I've always followed the Class family, but having them involved in our searches, it really kind of connected those dots and closed that loop for me, that maybe this is why these foundations exist, because that's the only way that you can feel that you are keeping your loved one's memory alive, and maybe that's how justice is extracted in these situations. Again, God forbid we're ever in this situation ourselves.
And so I'd almost reframe that and, replace the word justice with closure, maybe.
Right, yes. That's a good way to go with that.
And speaking of the Class Kids Foundation, Mark Class, of course, was helping with the search efforts back in April, I believe.
Yes.
And what was his role? He was helping train essentially untrained volunteers.
Yeah, so Mark Class, and I'm not going to know all the little details of it, but Mark Class himself, he has a foundation, and he has people working in that foundation. And the people that work in that foundation, they're very good at galvanizing groups of people, training these groups of people that are previously untrained, showing them how to work safely, what to look for, how to identify articles that we're looking for, and how to communicate those discoveries to the people that have to know.
And was there overlap between them and the police department? Because I know you two were sort of running parallel, but not necessarily. Was there actual an overlap?
There was a very good interface between the Class Foundation and Detective Tyler Horn. Detective Tyler Horn was our point man for this investigation, and he was juggling all of these entities all at the same time.
And I recall at I believe his most recent press conference, you had said this was the biggest case that Oakley has had, obviously. So.
Yes.
And I'm going to turn back into, you would just come onto the department back in September of last year. So how were you able to approach the biggest case in the city's history as, new to your role?
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've handled cases like this before, because I haven't. I was blessed with the sheriff's office to have had so many roles in the sheriff's office, and I did spend some time in investigations, and I did spend time looking for people that didn't want to be found, looking for evidence that nobody wanted to be found. And so having all that backdrop and experience really helped me help the guys to develop a plan. That is not to take anything at all away from my guys. My guys already know how to investigate, and they already know how to orchestrate and organize an effort. So it was a very collective effort on all of our parts to make sure we did what we should be doing in those early phases. I think the most daunting feeling was how big it was, and from the very onset, we did feel this was a big case.
And thankfully, for that reason, you were able to interface with several other departments. I know there's Antioch Police. What were some of the other departments that were involved?
Yeah, so FBI, Amador County, Contra Costa Sheriff's Office. Those are the agencies that readily come to mind, but there were truly so many more.
In what ways can the public continue to help with the investigation?
The tip line is still active. That tip line, just to put it out there again, is 925-625-7009. We still believe that somebody out there knows what happened. Somebody may know where Alexis is. And as more information comes out about that time frame, about where Marshall Jones had been, and just in those early stages around January 26 and 27, we believe people saw things that didn't, it wasn't relevant then, but now it's very relevant. And so we just simply ask people to, first of all, keep Alexis in mind, keep her memory alive, and also understand that there are people working for her still yet. That comes in the form of the case. So we want any tip that will help us out at this point.
Do you think her body will ever be recovered?
I do. I do realize that there are some cases where there's never been, that there just aren't recoveries. But I don't think we should enter our investigation with that frame of mind, even with Marshall Jones no longer being with us, and even with exhausting our efforts the way we have. I think we all still need to have hope, because with hope, you tend to stay engaged a little bit better. Taking the hope element out of it, I just still feel as if we will recover Alexis at some point.
This is a very pointed question, but do you believe that if Marshall Jones were still alive, that you'd have an easier time recovering the body?
For the longest time, I realized that Marshall Jones, he was a investigative avenue for us. How much of an avenue he was going to be for us, that was going to be decided by him. So it's really kind of difficult to answer that, but obviously without having him here, it does close the door.
If you don't mind me asking, how early in the investigation was it determined that he was the primary person of interest?
We did a broad spectrum look early on, and as the investigation wore on, I'm not going to have exact dates for this discussion, but as the investigation wore on, we were simply able to eliminate everybody else from her that was in her life as being a potential suspect in her disappearance. So I would say it took a good chunk of time. It took a few weeks.
And so speaking a little bit more broadly, then you said it eliminated the other people in her life. So typically when it comes to an investigation like this, it's usually someone that knows the person. It's rarely a random act of violence.
Yeah, I've investigated random acts, but typically, and most of the time, it is a known suspect.
How many officers are in the Oakley Police Department, and how many of them are devoting resources to this case, right now?
So I have 34 officers in the department right now from top to bottom. I have several officers out on injuries right now. Nobody on training right now, so that means everybody under our employ is off training, so that means they're available to us. So having those injuries in play, it does knock your numbers down a little bit. At the height of this case, I had between 7 and 10 officers assigned to this case. I should say it was about 7 officers, and then I had 3 other non-sworn people with a heavy hand in this investigation. So I would say roughly 1/3 of the department was actively engaged with this investigation.
How is the department juggling that case without straining the workload of the department as a whole on other stuff happening in town?
I don't know if I should say luckily or not, but luckily this was the biggest investigation going at the very same time. We did have another major incident in the city that I requested the assistance of the sheriff's office to come in and help us out with. Luckily they did, and I really appreciate the efforts and the investigation they put forth to help us out. So it really did become a situation of prioritizing what's important now, what can wait, and if it's important now, what do we have to do to get it done? And sometimes that mechanism came in the form of having to reach out and ask for help.
Is the department taking a more hands-off role now that we've gotten further down the road, now that the investigation is turning more towards the Pioneer area as well, with the revelation of the handwritten note by Marshall Jones?
We're not hands-off, but through this investigation, through this collaborative effort of multiple agencies, we have realized that this is a Antioch venue investigation. They are now the host agency, if you will. So we are now acting in a support role to the Antioch Police Department. I still have Detective Tyler Horn actively engaged in every aspect of the case. He regularly interacts with the Antioch detectives, and I'm assuming they trade notes every day, but I factually know it happens every week.
And is Detective Horn still actively involved in communicating with the Gabe family, with Gwen Gabe?
Yes, he is. He was, as I understand it, he was in communication with them this weekend.
Gwen has been, instrumental in galvanizing the community to help locate his daughter. Has that been a huge help for the department?
It has. The Gabe family, and I said this in one of the press conferences, it remains true today. It's just going to remain true for forever. I have been very impressed with the Gabe family. The way they have been able to live their life not only in the wake of what's happened, but in the moment of what was happening. Because when she was missing, she was still out there and alive somewhere, right? And that was the mission. That was the focus, to find Alexis alive and bring her back home. To find a family that have such strong and deep family roots, is just amazing to me, and they have been nothing but beneficial to the department and the investigation.
And do you think that how present they were on social media and everything, do you think that's part of why the public latched on this case so much? And we talked about what makes this different from other missing persons cases. Do you think that was a factor?
I do. Everything is, if it's not on social media today, it didn't happen, right? Even though that's a factually untrue statement, but because so many people are so engaged with their social media platforms, to see this story come up time and time and time again, and then to hear about what the story is. A normal, shall I say, missing woman. And again, normal being not that person who runs away frequently, not a person with psychological problems, not a person with drug addictions, that sort of thing. Just somebody that we can all relate to. We can all relate to Alexis Gabe. So that just kind of, when you hear that enough on social media, it just kind of sucks you into the investigation and the public interest level.
I want to clarify one more thing. I know you'd said it in one of the press conferences, but for listeners, what was the deciding factor that determined this was no longer a search for a living missing person?
Mm-hmm. So I'd have to jog my memory to reflect back on the things that we discovered during our investigation, but it really came down to a totality of circumstances. This was a normal young woman. She digitally just disappeared. No bank records, no cell phone records, nothing like that. And prior to her disappearance, prior to late January, that was just part of her normal life, just like we've discussed in this interview. Social media is normal to everybody. Using your bank card is normal to everybody. She just digitally disappeared. That combined with the note, the note that is now out there, combined with other pieces of evidence and information, just led us to believe that she was the victim of a homicide.
I've got one last question. Where does the budget come from for some of these search efforts? For example, Gwen had mentioned on social media that it cost the city $15,000 to drain a pond in the Pioneer area. Was that $15,000 that come from Oakley's budget or from Pioneer's budget, I guess would be the first question.
Yeah, at that time we were the host agency, so that was our responsibility. So I had to juggle our budget, and I had to shift money from different line items and pool some other money together just to make sure that action did take place.
Before we bring this home, was there anything else either about the Alexis Gabe case or just about yourself that you feel we haven't had touched on that listeners might like to hear?
I think we talked enough about me early on. I'm not a big self-talker. I would want the Oakley community and the East County community at large to know that the Oakley Police Department is progressing. We are on a constant hiring mission. I am very happy with all of our recent new hires. I think I have hired 6 people since I've been chief. And they are people from very diverse backgrounds, very diverse levels of experience. And I feel resolved in every single one of those decisions. And if this trend continues, which is my goal to make this trend continue to hire the best officers out there, the Oakley community will just be better served by their police department.
That's it for today's episode of Clocked In with the Press. We appreciate you taking the time to listen in, and we look forward to speaking with you in future episodes. I'd like to thank Chief Beard once again for taking the time to join me this week. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'd also like to thank you, the listeners. If you'd like to read more stories about East Contra Costa County, you can do so on our website at www.thepress.net or through our Twitter and Instagram at PressClockedIn. Be sure to tune in this Friday for your local news and sports highlights. And as always, contact us with your thoughts on this episode or any other before it by emailing podcasts@brentwoodpress.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon. This is Jake.
And Paul.
Clocking out.
Thanks again to this week's sponsor, Sip and Scoop. Remember that feeling of hearing the ice cream truck coming down the street as a kid? Bring back that feeling by visiting Sip and Scoop. They started out as a truck too, and now they have a brick and mortar shop right here in Brentwood, so you don't have to chase them down the block. Sip and Scoop has all kinds of high-quality desserts to satisfy any sweet tooth. Gelato, root beer floats, and iced coffees are just a few of my favorites. And the whole menu is available to go on DoorDash. Stop by their shop in downtown Brentwood and get your scoop on.